Welcome to another broadcast of Truth Be Told, where we believe in experience becomes truth. I'm your host, Tony Sweet, and with me now, we finally have back with us Captain Ron. We are excited to have our guest on today, David Sereda. He is a author and filmmaker. He is best known for Dan Aykroyd Unplugged of UFOs. I'm so excited to talk to him about that, and also the movie From Here to Andromeda, where a man, a woman, and their dog embark on a journey in search of a way to travel to Andromeda to find a new home for humanity. And also, David is a serious environmentalist, and I'm curious to talk about his thoughts of us pulling out of the Paris Accord. And today's going to be a very diverse but very deep conversation. So please join us right here on Truth Be Told. So welcome to Truth Be Told, David Sereda. Oh, welcome, David, the man. How are you?
I'm here. I am here.
You are here, and that's a good thing.
Everywhere you go in the universe, you are always here.
Yeah. Well, sometimes take me with you.
That gets really deep. Even the physics of that in my galaxy clock would blow your mind. It would, if you looked at my galaxy clock and you saw everywhere in the universe inside the galaxy that all the seconds in the here and now are all connected through a wave.
Right.
That is way faster than light speed.
Really?
Time is not just a dimension, it's actually a force. And that's what Einstein didn't get. I mean, he put, height, width, depth,
Right.
depth, and time as the four dimensions. But time is not just a dimension, it's a force. And I've been able to measure it in my galaxy clock, which was in the first video I made with Dan Aykroyd in the insert introduction, evidence, the case for NASA UFOs. I made that film in North Hollywood and with a bunch of guys, Henrik and John Johnson, and great guys. And it got probably 50 million views over the years between Google Video, which eventually became, then YouTube came, and there was no Google Video anymore. And,
right. Google kind of put it out of place.
The Galaxy Clock was massive. It was the beginning of vortex mathematics that led to Marco Rodin, who does the Rodin coils, talked to me, and he then took vortex mathematics to, into his dimension, but he was very inspired by my work. And then Nassim Harriman did something on vortex energy. And so vortex energy, there's a lot of people working on it, but there's a dimension in my galaxy clock that shows the speed of light squared. I mean, how tiny Einstein's speed of light squared idea is in only two dimensions. And it starts to show you that there are no actual squares because the speed of light starts to curve space. And the curvature of space-time, which connects all of the seconds, on the wheels of any galaxy, moving towards its center.
Right.
All those here and now seconds are all connected by a band, a wave, a force, and it goes way faster than light speed eventually. And that is time, and as a force, as opposed to just a unit of measure in a dimension.
Faster than light speed.
Faster than light speed. In fact, Tesla, who's truly the father of radio, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled June 21st, 1943, that Tesla, Sir Oliver Lodge, who was also a mystic, Lodge was a mystic, and Stone were the true fathers of radio. And Tesla demonstrates radio at the Chicago World's Fair in 1893. And he looks at dimensions of an electromagnetic wave that are already faster than light. And we're stuck on this one dimension of riding a wave, right? So look, here's a wave in two dimensions bobbing up and down. This is what they teach you in school. But two dimensions don't really exist. We have three spatial dimensions that we experience. And now there's a new level of physics that knows how to see 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 dimensional, spaces. So when you get into more and more dimensions of a wave, there are different ways of accessing those higher dimensions. For example, if this is the speed of light, you're measuring the axis through the center of the wave is the speed of light. So if you uncoiled that wave, it's already more than the speed of light. But what I found when I looked at subatomic particle explosions in the early days, before we ruined the photography method of looking at explosions, for example, at CERN in the search for the God particle.
Right.
The way they do it now is stupid. It's actually, you're missing all the data. Because what they do now is it's like a bunch of razor blades stacked together. It's called scintillation counting.
Right.
So when a particle explodes and scintillates through these wafers, each wafer sends out a signal to produce a digital image. But in the real photographic days in cloud chambers, you could see a wave within a wave within a wave within a wave. So if this is the speed of light through the center, then the total measure of this is faster. But then there's another wave spinning inside of that wave. That's way faster than the two-dimensional wave model. And then there's another wave spinning in that wave and another wave spinning in that wave. And the speeds of those spins go way, way beyond the speed of light. But what I discovered in the galaxy clock is different. And that is that speed of light, you can't square it. You can only square it from a very myopic, very small perspective. And eventually, when you open up to the greater picture of giant orbits of giant waves, you can start to see, when you connect all the seconds, what causes the curvature of space-time is actually the seconds. And whether you use a human second or an alien second, it doesn't matter. That's just the unit of measure. But the point is, it's the time that is bending the space and curving it. And you can see when you zoom out of the Milky Way galaxy, you can see that big vortex and the spiral arms. And that's what I'm talking about. And I actually show that is actually not electromagnetism speed of light. So there's Tesla.
Right.
This is a whole new theory on Roswell, I'm going to tell you.
Oh, good.
And Tesla starts getting, and you can Google this, Tesla was receiving radio messages from both Mars and Venus.
Really?
This is the father of radio, right? So you say now people look at that and they go, oh, there's nobody on Mars or Venus, so Tesla must have been crazy. But not if somebody parked their ship on Mars or even Venus's atmosphere. That wouldn't make him crazy at all. And in fact, there could be people living underground on Mars. So what Tesla does is that you can actually see some of his math and the way he produced these. Like, remember radio in the early days, you'd have long wave and short wave.
Right.
And long wave is just low frequency. And then you had shortwave, which is just a little bit higher frequency. And then you had AM amplitude modulation, and FM is frequency pulsed modulation. So when you're talking or you have music, it's a magnet that pulses the information onto the amplitude or the peak of the wave, and FM is the frequency of the wave. But AM radio is typically lower frequency. So you can do... See, the lower the frequency of a wave, the greater the punch, the more amplitude you got. And I'll give you a great example where Tesla synchronizes his lab in Colorado Springs with the long Earth wave. So the electromagnetic wave is going all the way around the Earth, just about 7.5 times a second at the equator, and 7.83 times where he measured it. And when he synchronizes with this huge wave, it's like a surfer jumping on a wave, he shorts the entire state of Colorado, and he gets kicked out of Colorado, and he has to move to New York. That's how much punch is in a long amplitude wave. And then the waves get higher and higher frequency, they lose their amplitude, and so you go to FM, frequency modulation, and then you go to where we are today. So Tesla I believe he sent out a signal just before the year 1900, and this is in this new Majestic document that, of course, everybody thinks everything's fake now. On the internet,
right,
you can...
Fake news, fake everything.
I mean, it's all fake. I mean, fake news, fake UFO footage. It's making a real mess. And there's fake UFO researchers with fake stories, and you don't know who to believe.
Right.
What do you think of the Majestic 12 documents? Do you think they're real, authentic?
Well, I think some of them are. But you see, they're only there's fragments of them that are real. See, if you want to distort the truth and you know there's a breach of security and you're working at those levels of the government, all you have to do is leak a document with a little bit of truth and some lies. And if the truth got out before the document, then you release a document with truth and lies, and then someone finds the lie, they dismiss the entire thing. You see? And it's just like the photos of the Roswell alien.
Right.
I have them, Boyd Bushman. And they knew they got leaked, so they made a doll that looked very similar, but they weren't smart enough to do what I did to those photos. And then people go, okay, got to be fake because we have a doll from Hollywood with these dark circles around the eyes, and it's got to be fake. So that's what they do. Every time they knew they have a breach, same with MJ12, they send out a bunch of new documents. But these newest MJ documents that came out, by Black Bolt, said something about that the aliens at Roswell, they got a message from us 50 years before 1947. And what interested me about 50 years before 1947 is that's just before 1900 when Tesla invented radio, set up his lab in Colorado Springs. And if he sent out a message and then they got it within, say, 25 light years, and then it took him another, who knows? We don't even know. He might have sent the message to Mars and they got here really fast.
Right.
But they said 50 years before, and that's what interested me because that's when radio was born. Radio was born 50 years. Chicago World's Fair, 1893. Okay, so get your calculator. And that's when Tesla demonstrates it. And so you get your calculator. I mean, this is only to what we know about the Chicago World's Fair. I mean, he did it before that. So 1893 plus 50 years, and you get 1943, right? So give Tesla a few more years and you're at 1947. This is my little baby Astoria here. So what does that tell you? It tells you that Tesla was messing around with radio, and he's messing around with some faster than light aspects of the wave. And the MJ document says the aliens, spoke English. Of course they could understand our language. All you got to do is listen to our broadcast.
Right.
People think, oh, how could they know English? I mean, how stupid do you think these people are? If they can fly here from another planet or another star system, they're a lot smarter than you and I are. and not as smart as this little thing.
I was going to say, they even know baby talk.
Tony, I'll give you that.
Right.
So look at this. We got Chicago World's Fair, 1893. Radio was born, and 50 years later, it's 1943, and 47 is Roswell. And Tesla, she's sticking a little stuffy in my mouth. Tesla, starting to develop the death ray, this super beam weapon. According to these FBI files, the death ray was being developed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base starting in about 1943, before Roswell. So this is getting really interesting. Did Tesla beckon a response? And here's the other interesting thing about if you're an extraterrestrial. If you know how to calculate the wavelength from Colorado Springs, let's say he had a wavelength of the radius of the wave is between Colorado Springs and where the Roswell crash was. The UFOs would be searching for the source of the circular circumference diameter of the wave. And all of the sightings were Portland, Oregon, as I mentioned. Then you have Ken Arnold in June. And then you have Edwards Air Force Base in California. And then you have, actually, according to Boyd Bushman, they shoot the Roswell craft down with the Tesla death ray in New Mexico. And New Mexico, Roswell, is just down from Colorado Springs, which is on the southern tip of Colorado. So you have this, the wavelength of the Earth is the circumference of the Earth. So when you look at 7.5 hertz, that's how big the circumference of a wave that size is, a standing oscillating wave. So it's the speed of light divided by the wavelength is the frequency. So if Tesla was using longer waves and he was able to tap into a dimension of the wave that's faster than light, then that would put him, and I believe the longer wavelengths are the most interesting ones. Today we're going higher and higher and higher and higher frequency. Now watch this. So what else happens on the Roswell incident? And we were talking about this off air before the show. Is I have these J. Edgar Hoover declassified FBI files, and these are non-disputed. And Hoover is in a mess. He's got real flying saucers from Portland to Yakima, Washington, to Edwards Air Force Base. I think there were 7 or 8 flying saucers there. And when did your flying saucer come in, my little bear? And then these kids all over the United States are building toy flying saucers that fly using anti-gravitics. Anti-gravitics. And in North Hollywood on Magnolia Boulevard, and this is in my From Here to Andromeda film, I actually, I had Dean Haglund from the X-Files in there. Quentin Tarantino's dad, Tony, was in there. Uma Thurman's dad was in there. I had a lot of great dads in there. Plus, I had Dean. And I'm showing the actual pictures of this kid's flying saucer, and he flies it on July the 8th, 1947. I mean, the day after Roswell. And there's other kids all over the United States before the internet, so you couldn't disseminate things that fast. And they build a toy. No kid today, no adult today can build a toy flying saucer that flies using anti-gravitics. So how did all these kids get the message? Well, in 1968, which is, of course, a long time later, I see a UFO in Berkeley. Everyone's going crazy over this thing. And in the following weeks, I keep having dreams of the Palladian humanoids. They don't use the word Pleiades. They just showed me their stars. And they showed me that little diamond cluster of stars. And they showed me the drive, and they showed me how it worked. But I was too young at 7 years old in 1968 to build the thing. But the point is they were doing this. So this is like an incredible Spielberg movie. You got these kids. Right. The aliens were probably trying to give us a technology that could circumvent the need to have nuclear energy. And I'll tell you where I quantify even that statement. Because I had lunch with Gwen Seaborg, who was the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission under Kennedy, Johnson, and Nixon. And Seaborg, I was working with him in this big nuclear fusion project. He's very old at the time. And we're sitting at the Lawrence Berkeley lab having lunch with his assistant, Albert Ghiorso, and Bogdan Maglich, a brilliant fusion scientist. And I told him all about my sighting. And I said, this lab had a perfect view of my sighting. And he said, if you could develop anything like anti-gravity, he said, you wouldn't even need nuclear fusion. You don't even need nuclear energy. Because once you can cancel out the weight of a spacecraft, the energy it takes to move it at incredible speeds are tiny little pulses. All of the energy is thrust to get, out of the Earth orbit.
Right.
So Seaborg was quite blown away by it. Later, a physicist who works at the Space Lab told me that we all saw a UFO from this lab in 1972. So that's only a few years later, right? 68 to 72. So they admitted they were seeing UFOs there. Now, the transistor, this is a great movie called Transistorized on PBS. You could probably see this on YouTube because everything's there. Now, the transistor was invented in 1947 by 3 guys. Will Shockley, John Bardeen, and Will Bratton.
It was a big year.
And so what was going on? Putting information in the minds of teenagers to build flying saucers that used anti-gravitics and flew. And I've investigated exactly how that technology worked for those teenagers, and I know exactly what they did. But these guys invent the transistor at the same time. I mean, was the same thing happening? Were ETs putting ideas in electrical engineers' minds? Because this transistor, this little piece of quartz crystal with some layers of different materials. So you when you layer, crystal semiconductor with conductive materials, which is your metals, you get transistors that are positive, positive, or negative, negative, NPN or PNP transistors. And transistors, when they first came out, they were amplifiers. They would amplify radio signals. You put them in radios. And today's transistors are used as gates and amplifiers, right? So you can amplify. An Intel chip will have several billion transistors in it. But the smaller, and then you have crystal oscillators that are very similar, and they're just pieces of quartz with conductive materials that generate the frequencies that are running everything. So everything is going higher and higher and higher frequency, because the smaller the chips are, the higher the frequency they operate, which means the lower the amp, the less it takes to get a phone or anything to work. We're going into higher and higher frequencies. But Tesla was looking at bigger and bigger and bigger wavelengths. So I looked at the Great Pyramid with this whole new theory that this thing had 3 or more layers of materials, like a giant transistor, the radioactive osmium granite in the core, and then it had the 2 different types of limestone blocks. Well, that's how you build a transistor. So I'm going to calculate the frequencies the Great Pyramid would generate. And what happens in a semiconductor is, depending on the charge of the electricity, to get the electrons excited in the semiconductor, you can either use heat, fire with stone is a semiconductor, or you can use an actual electric charge, like Chris Dunn is saying. So let's say Chris Dunn is right. It's a power plant, but it's not to produce power. It has a way higher function than that, and that is one massive whopping transistor sitting there. So what happens is, when the electrons, the way we measure the frequency of a crystal oscillator today is based on the dimensions or size of the crystal and the velocity of the excitement of the electrons in the jumping shells in the atoms. And then you have the electromagnetic charge moving through the material. And the material impedes on the movement of the electromagnetic force. And that is called the refractive index. So the refractive index in different materials slows down the speed of light, but I wasn't really interested in that. I was more interested in just above the surface of the Great Pyramid. Mm-hmm. The charge would be at the speed of light, just above the refractive index speed, which is less than that. For example, in copper wire, it's about 60% the speed of light. So if you're running electromagnetism through a copper coil, it's about 60% the speed of light. So I took the speed of light divided by the square capstone of the top of the pyramid, the unfinished base. I got 5.151 megahertz square. And that's the slope angle of the pyramid, 51 degrees, 51 minutes.
Wow.
So how the heck, if you didn't know the speed of light, which even in Einstein's time, he did not have an accurate speed of light to do all of his calculations, E equals mc squared, you need the speed of light squared accurate. So he didn't have it accurate because we didn't know it until the late 70s. And then and they did all this stuff down in Irvine. You know that the speed of light was all calculated down in Irvine. That they built the tunnel, the vacuum tunnel. It was all built right through there, Orange County. That's cool. The home. So California is the history of the speed of light. So the point is, if you didn't know that, you wouldn't know to finish the Great Pyramid at that exact square base to produce the same frequency as the number as the slope angle. So I calculated all the electromagnetic frequencies from the subterranean pyramid under the dirt to the ground level to up. And I looked at the numbers. I was so blown away when I looked at the numbers. I said, whoever frickin' designed this thing not only knew the speed of light, but it intended it to be a giant frequency generator with these perfect harmonic. Each side is a different wavelength because each side of the Great Pyramid is a different length.
Right.
So you square and the firing sequence of the numbers was north, south, east, west, north, south, east, west. It was a perfect firing sequence in generating a magnetic field north, south, east, west instead of north, east, and then west and then south, for example, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I looked at the numbers and I said, and believe me, it's not easy to get the right measurements in the pyramid because I had to resolve the speed of light down to the inch, because you have to be your speed of light divided by the wavelength. If you're measuring something small, you got to use your speed of light in this same measure. You can't just take a whopping 186,282 miles because that's not even accurate. You got to have a way more accurate speed of light, and that's not easy to get. So I did it. I got 5.151, same number. And then when you know what a true royal cubit inch is, the length of the Ark of the Covenant of Moses is the same number. It's 51.5125 inches when you know the true length of a royal cubit. So then you see, why does this number rule? Why is Stonehenge at 51 degrees 1 minute? Why is Area 51 called Area 51? Why are there 50 states in the United States and the 51st state is hidden, District of Columbia, and Area 51? So there you go. Somebody knew this a long time ago, and there's something about that number and frequency. So I decided to do all the math all the way up, And then when I looked at the numbers, I moved the decimal over to the audible where the music scale is. And I had 10 base numbers from 10 bands of the pyramid, subterranean and 7 frequencies from the floor, ground base of the pyramid up. And then I got a signal generator and I entered our music scale. And there's a video, you can see this online. And then when you do our music scale, A, B, C, D, F, G, 7 tones, it wobbles, distorts. There's distortion. And then I tested the famous 432 scale, wobbled even worse. And then I tested the 444 classical music scale, and it was absolutely the worst, totally distorted. But when I did the pyramid scale, it was boom, boom, boom. And I leave each note on. You don't turn A, B, you don't turn them off. You keep them all on. And you want to see how perfectly they're humming. And you want to hear the distortion between them. And you can hear this in my video test. The pyramid scale was the winner. And then I found the pyramid octave. And our octave in music is ×2. So I used a pyramid octave. And it didn't matter how many octaves I went up and how many I went down from my main spine of numbers.
Right.
And I retone tested going up. It was still perfect. So I got 360 tones, which, as there are 360 degrees in a circle, all within the range of the human ear, all perfect.
That's amazing.
The most massive music scale discovered in the history of the world. I mean, and at one point before Prince died, I was meeting in Sedona with one of his assistants, and the assistant was telling me Prince is broke right now, and he's living in a friend's mansion in Los Angeles, and he would be really interested in this. But she said, he must already know this. And I said, no, he doesn't know this. Trust me, he doesn't know it. I need to meet Prince. I need to talk to him about this. And she said, oh, well, he knows everything. He has to know this. So she wouldn't introduce me to him, and he dies. And there you go. I'm trying to get this music scale into Hollywood. So maybe you guys are the guys.
Well, David, let me ask you this real quick, though.
Yeah.
And I asked the same thing with Christopher Dunn about, he said the chambers and some of the not tombs, but most of the chambers had an acoustic quality in that. Why do you feel that they created such, like you said, the music scale for this pyramid? Is there some? I mean, is this like a device to connect to a different galaxy, to a different world? I mean, what do you think that these?
See, there you go. What do you do with a small transistor? You
Right.
tune any two crystal oscillators,
Right.
and using transistors to amplify that very weak radio signal that you can't hear. So the oscillator tunes it, and then the transistor amplifies it. You use it to send information.
So the Great Pyramid might be the big.
You can do that with it. You can do that with a tiny transistor. So why did the builder of the Great Pyramid, and I've now written a book that proves who built it, because I use mathematics to prove who designed it, and it's definitely not Egyptians. And we know who built it. But the point is, why build a transistor that big? To move physical things through a Stargate is the answer. Because if you can move weightless data with a transistor smaller than you can see, because you can't see the transistors in an Intel chip.
Right.
There's 3 or 4 billion transistors sitting there. So when you have a transistor as big as the Great Pyramid, and you have that many electrons spinning, and the magnetic field produces a square wave vortex, and you're compressing the wave at the top, and then you have the chambers inside, and you have all this insulation of all that stone to trap waves inside. You should see what happens when you trap waves, electromagnetic waves. What happens when you trap an electromagnetic wave in a chamber and it can't get out?
Would it destroy
because
it?
the material is too dense. It opens up a quantum tunneling event. And quantum tunneling events, you can Google that, generate faster than light portals on small scale. So we can already do this on a small scale. Like, we can already make tiny quantum tunneling events on a small scale, but this is on a huge scale. And so I believe what happened with the Great Pyramid was, yes, Chris Dunn's right, that it could generate power. But in what rode up and down the Grand Gallery was probably the Ark of the Covenant, which is the charge. And when, just like, when I was a kid in Berkeley, one of my first things you learn in school was take a toilet paper roll, wrap the copper wire around it, get a diode, and you connect the rod, and you slide your little conductor rod up and down the coil, and you change AM frequencies, right? So you're changing frequencies by sliding up and down the dial. But with a slope tuner, and then the charge is riding up and down the Grand Gallery, you're changing frequencies. But a slope tuner is better than a cylindrical coil.
Right.
You see, so Tesla made the cylindrical. But when you make the slope tuner, it's way more precise than a cylinder.
Hey,
So
hold
when
on a
you're-
second there, Brian. Jason Martell recently told us at Contact that the what they call the sarcophagus in the King's Chamber is exactly the same dimensions as the Ark of the Covenant.
No, it isn't, but it's really close, and it's disturbing. It's incredibly
amazing
close.
how close it is.
You have to know the math. Like where I got the true royal cubit inch is in Peter Le Messurier's book. It's the first book I ever read. When I decided to, where is it? Astoria. Here's with her sister. I know I have it sitting around here. This book was published in the 70s, and Le Messurier wrote The Great Pyramid Decoded, and I'm really surprised that even he didn't figure this out. Astoria. So anyway, in over 14 places in the Great Pyramid, you'll see this number, 41.21 inches. And an Egyptian inch is almost the same as our inch. It's 0.00106 difference. But he's actually, in this particular measure, using our inch versus the Egyptian inch. And our inch comes from the Egyptian inch. So 41.21 inches is 2 royal cubits, and you'll see that everywhere in the Great Pyramid. You'll see it all over the place, and it's in my book, God's Great Pyramid, at davidsereda.net. So you take your calculator and go, if 41.21 is consistent, 2 royal cubits, then half of that is 20.605 inches. So why is it that the royal cubit today is somewhere, but they say it could be anywhere between 20.6 and 20.8, right? Like, how come no one figured this out? This is pretty obvious. And what it tells you is the rulers that they found of the Egyptians were slightly inconsistent with each other, which means the Egyptians didn't come up with the royal cubit inch. They were trying to figure it out themselves, and that's why their rulers were not all the same. So once you study the Great Pyramid, with precise units of measure, it's 20.605. So when God says make the Ark of the Covenant 2.5, it's royal cubits, because the angel, we know in Ezekiel, the angel appears to Ezekiel, said that your unit of measure is a cubit and a handbreadth. So a cubit is elbow to finger plus a handbreadth. And that means royal cubit. Whenever the handbreadth is added.
Right.
And funny, mine, because I'm 6 feet tall, is 20.605. So my body, cubit, my elbow to finger and handbreadth is 20.6. So, and that wouldn't be the same for everybody, right? So the point is that, guess what 2.5 times 20.605 is? 515125.
Uh-huh.
And we know that's the length of Moses' staff, and because it says in the book of Exodus that the staff of Aaron and the 12 tribes of Israel's staff laid down in the ark. So we now know the length of Moses' staff is the sacred 515125. And now you take God's Great Pyramid. This is going to blow your mind. Watch this.
All right, I'm ready.
You take the 300 royal cubits for Noah's Ark. So I'm going to get my calculator. You can do this because everybody has a computer now. This is going to blow your mind. Watch this. So you take 300 royal cubits for Noah's Ark, supposedly a boat, times 20.605 inches per royal cubit, and you get the golden ratio number 6,181.5. So you got the 61815. Now divided by 12 inches per foot, you got 515125 feet.
Wow.
Same number. But it's
Wow.
515 now, 0.125 instead of 51.5125. So the same
amazing.
number as the slope angle as the Great Pyramid is Noah's Ark in feet. They didn't have feet back then,
Right.
according to, but we did have the 12 tribes of Israel. So holy cow. And it gets more and more spellbinding. Why that number is so sacred. It's sacred to America, the 51 state and the 51st state hidden, Area 51, and then you're going to go all the way to Roswell. You're actually going to find out. I mean, what I'm doing now, and I'm launching this. It's on davidsereda.net. I sell these harmonic transmitter coils, and I sell these, flashlight tube wands with the ruby core and the tourmaline cores, and they're quite expensive, and they transmit pyramid frequencies into your body in your home to counter all the negative fields that we have around us. But now I'm just selling a simple ebook that will teach you how to build a sacred length transmitter for only $200, and it will come with all these frequencies of all these sacred sites from the Holy of Holies, the Ark of the Covenant, Solomon's Temple, the Great Pyramid, the pyramids of South America, the megalithic circles in England. I've calculated all the frequencies of all these sacred sites. And the numbers are all the same. And that's what's amazing, is the Druids' numbers were the same as the Egyptian frequency numbers and the same as the Holy of Holies numbers. And so you're going to be, what it does when you generate a wavelength in your house with a very simple little $75 power source, my ebook teaches you how to make it. It's really simple. It's only 2 parts, 3 parts, and then you just punch in the numbers for any sacred site you want, including the Holy of Holies. And it generates that wavelength around your house, and you're starting to produce a protection field, a harmonic protection field around your space, because these fields affect your aura and your energy more than anything else. And right now, you're being bombarded by undesirable frequencies. I have a whole video on this on YouTube. But now, for only $111, you get my book with the instructions, and then if we can get thousands of these, I'm hoping. And everybody starts transmitting these sacred numbers all over the planet, something's going to happen. Something big is going to happen. But I figure I need at least 1,000 people to do this. So total will cost you $300 for everything. And you'll have your own transmitter, and you can leave it on all day. And you can just, go through the manual and say, well, today I want this megalithic circle in Ireland, and I want the frequency of that one. Or I want the Great Pyramid base, or I want the capstone of the Great Pyramid, or I want the King's Chamber or the Queen's Chamber, whatever you want. And see, what the pyramid is doing is when the electrons are excited, they carry the electromagnetic force. There's a resistance to that force in the stone. But just on the skin of the stone, it's the speed of light. So it's generating a hologram. There's an electronic invisible hologram of the Great Pyramid when it's turned on, with those exact dimensions, setting up a field of energy that makes anyone within that field of energy have easy access to a higher experience. And I've actually experienced this. And I want other people to have this experience. And so,
David, is there a better frequency over the other? Because, in Stonehenge or the Great Pyramid, is there one better than the other, or are they just kind of equal and just different?
Well, they all end up using, when you do the speed of light divided by the wavelength, and again, you got to have it all really accurate the way. And I teach people how to do it, so you can pick a sacred site that I haven't done yet, and in the book. But you're going to see the same numbers, and you're going to wonder why. Why did the Druids produce circles? And I went to Chaco Canyon, in New Mexico, and I have a book, and I really need to get a better, like a laser, use a laser, like a laser to get the radius and the diameter of the circle.
Right.
But even from the data I have in this book on Chaco Canyon, it is so close to the frequency of the capstone of the Great Pyramid. It's a smidgen off, and I know that their measure is off. I know that they're going to be the same number when I'm done, when I go to Chaco Canyon myself with a laser. But why would the circular of Chaco Canyon's big hall why would the speed of light divided by that wavelength be the same number as the square
Right.
frequency of the capstone of the Great Pyramid? Like, how could that number be so close? What causes that? Is it because there was a civilization before ours that understood frequency way better than we do? And that they, or did angels, as in Ezekiel, because Ezekiel's temple was never built. It was supposed to be the new Solomon's temple, and it was never built. And I believe the original Solomon's temple, they used the wrong cubit, and it didn't vibrate perfectly, and that's why it got destroyed, because it wasn't resonating perfect.
Right.
And in fact, in the town of Migdal, where Mary Magdalene lived, Smithsonian unveiled the square wall of the Holy of Holies of her village's temple. And I looked at the measure, because I know the true measure using the royal cubit inch. Now, see, here's another number. So you take, in the Bible, the cube inside of Solomon's temple where the Ark of the Covenant goes is 20 royal cubits. And 20 royal cubits, you get your calculator. This is another mind-blowing number. Watch this. Very simple math, right? So you take, once you know that it's 20.605 inches per royal cubit, you take your calculator and you go 20.605 times 20, because it's 20 royal cubits per side of the cube. It's 4121. Oh my God, where do I know that number? The most common measurement in the Great Pyramid.
Huh.
But it's one decimal over. It's one decimal over. So why would whoever designed Solomon's temple, which is God's angel as an instruction,
Right.
have the same number that's all over the Great Pyramid?
Wow.
Because that's the same God and the same angel that probably designed the Great Pyramid, wouldn't it? Because it's the same number.
That's amazing. Well, David,
So with that,
David, we have about
yeah.
1.5 minutes left, and this is great conversation. This is stuff that we have not discussed on Truth Be Told before, and so this is great stuff. And definitely, before we let you go, I want to know what's going on. Do you have anything coming out that you want to promote? A new film, new book? Let us know. So,
if you go to my website, is David Sereda, SEREDA.net, and you'll see this new book you can get for $111.11 that I'm pre-selling it, because I need to get a certain amount of people to buy it before I release it, because I don't want people sharing it for free and scattering, 3 years of my newest research and just throwing it to the wind. And because I've had all my films stolen on YouTube, and I've lost huge amounts of money and investments, and I'm trying to rebuild my research center.
Right.
I really need people just a tiny amount of money. $100 today is like $10 was in the 80s.
Right.
So I'm just asking for people to pay for that. Wait until it's released, and don't file share it, so that my work gets supported. And then it'll teach you how to build a low cost transmitter that will allow you to create a hologram of any of these sacred sites in your home to protect you from Wi-Fi and mind control.
Right.
And then I have the more expensive ones on my website, and I have my frequency treated pendants on my website, and I have the tones from the pyramid music scale in a meditation course is on davidsereda.net.
I'll definitely,
and you can write
pick
me
that
davidsereda@hotmail.com.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely gonna pick that up. I'm very looking forward to that. So this is great conversation, and I love your work. I love your research. A big fan, and please, Captain Ron and I would love to invite you back sometime in the future and talk about more of your projects.
Yeah, we'll go to the next level, because
of course this was just we just touched the surface. So I think
scratch the surface here.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and I'd like Chris Dunn to hear this show. That would be great. I'd like to connect with him. I think we should all... I was supposed to be at Contact in the Desert and present what I'm telling you, but because of some stuff going on with my family that's very, very heavy, I couldn't make it.
Right.
So
hopefully
step of what I'm going to do there.
Well, anything we can help, that we're glad we can have you on, and we hopefully can promote anything that you have to share. And again, people, go to davidsereda.net, pick up the book, and go. What's the other one for the tones for the?
And if you go to the Quantum Regenesis class on flash drive, I have 26 lessons
Oh, great.
That for 2 years in a row, they teach you how to work with the tones
Perfect.
from the Great Pyramid with your voice.
All right, sir. Well, thank you so much, and have a great weekend, but come back and see us real soon.
Okay, thanks, you guys. Take care.
You got it.
From the 60s. I'm from the
Right.
60s.
That's right. All right.
Okay.
All right. We'll talk to you soon, David.
Take care. Bye, guys.
But Captain Ron, that was good.
That was good.
Had a great time, and we hope everybody enjoyed it. Please come enjoy our videos on YouTube. We'd love to have you subscribe to us. Leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Suggestions on, we always throw these out there. Give us suggestions on people you would love to have on Truth Be Told. We'd try to get them on. And please subscribe to us on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Play now. So we definitely want to have you join the Truth Be Told family. And until next time, I'm Tony Sweet.
Captain Ron.
We'll see you then.